In 1939, World War II began. Hitler decided to be a very naughty artist and invaded Poland on September 1st. Britain and France had previously warned Hitler against the invasion, and so they declared war on him. Hitler didn't want to fight a war on two sides, so before that he allied with Joseph Stalin, and they dapped each other up. Together, they absolutely violated poor Poland, and Britain and France were left shocked. France dropped his baguette and cries about it like a loser, so Hitler uses the opportunity to take over Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and then begins to invade France. It originally looked like it would be a repeat of World War I, but using the very cool and speedy strategy of blitzkrieg, which is an encircling technique, they began breaking through the Maginot Line. Britain tried their best to assist by sending their best soldiers, but France fell in 1940 and was turned into a puppet state, making it seem like France had turned against their buddy Britain. Nazi Germany was making great progress, and so Britain called their successful distant child, America, asking for aid. America said they wouldn't join the war, but they did send weapons, food, and other supplies. This also caused America to begin a clothes rationing to better manage their resources.
So what is clothes rationing exactly? Well, to make it simple, many people may know about food rationing, which is just as similar to clothes rationing, except this time the item that was rationed was clothes. Clothes rationing happened on June 1st, 1941 in mostly countries such as the UK and the US. It took place in order to have fabrics such as wool, cotton, nylon, silk, and more to be used in more military necessities during World War II. Some examples of why these fabrics were needed were in military uniforms and military equipments, such as parachutes, which used silk. The rationing of clothes greatly affected fashion during the 1940s because it restricted the production of many clothes-in items. Another example was many of the clothes were uniform-like. Women's clothing all shared the same similarities and all were restricted to certain lengths, shapes, and patterns in order to avoid a large amount of fabric usage. Specifically, Christian Dior made a popular trend where he used women's clothing and consisted them of rounded shoulders and fuller hip styles on their skirts. Other popular common looks seen in the 1940s was the Rosie the Riveter look, which consisted of a working jumpsuit with a bandana and working boots. This was very common during the 1940s since this was when women made the breakthrough in the working industry. As for men who were fighting the war usually stuck to suits. However, those were also altered to have fewer pockets to avoid the usage of more fabrics. In conclusion, due to the urge of fabrics needed more for military use, it would later on help influence and change fashion to what it has become throughout the years after rationing. In addition, it helped equally distribute the use of fabrics to their military necessities and to the civilians. Despite many civilians not being fond of the rationing idea, it did end up helping the evolution of fashion.
The war started to stress everybody out, even those in the United States, which still wasn't officially in the war. New music and musicians would rise and ease the people.
Struck by times of war, the people of the U.S. needed something to lift their spirits. Music was the perfect antidote to the wartime depression. The 1940s gave birth to a new era of music. Jazz was one of the most popular genres at the time. The most desired style of jazz was called swing music. This style of jazz was so popular that it inspired people to start dancing more in the barn. This led to the invention of swing dancing, where two partners held each other's hands and danced in a circle. Swing is a sub-genre of music that originated in the black communities of Harlem during the 1920s. It became popular in the swing era, which began in 1935 after a band led by white artist Benny Goodman joined the game. Not too long after, Count Basie and his band of black musicians emerged. Count Basie and Benny Goodman are considered by many as the kings of swing. Swing music began a new trend of bands making music, although there were many influential solo artists as well. Some good examples are Frank Sinatra, Charlie Parker, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, and many more. Music brought people together during tough times. Some American musicians even made patriotic songs to support the war effort. It is undeniable that music was one of the most prominent aspects of pop culture in the 40s.
Back to the war, Italy wanted to join the victory train that Hitler set in motion, but they absolutely sucked trying to take over Africa because Britain wouldn't let anybody else take their colonized land. That's a joke. So Mussolini just sat there sucking on his beverage. Hitler had been sending many Jews and other ethnic minorities to concentration camps, and in 1941, millions died in the event known as the Holocaust. He would also turn his attention to the Soviet Union by betraying Stalin and doing the largest ground invasion in history. They made major progress, but the Soviets held strong, and when the winter came, there was not much the Nazis could do. Many froze to death and stood no chance against the Special Siberian Front forces. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Japan was doing really well for themselves. They have taken over Korea, Indonesia, basically every Pacific island, large parts of China, and other countries. Emperor Hirohito and his country were feeling really ballsy. The emperor decided he wanted to expand even more, and since some islands were controlled by the British and Americans, he would bomb Pearl Harbor to cripple the Navy, since otherwise he wouldn't have a chance to win a direct naval fight. Many ships were bombed and many lives were lost, but they made the mistake of not bombing the repair yards, the oil storage, or the submarine dock, so the US would be back and running very soon. The US joined the war and began fighting on both sides of the world, beginning an island-hopping campaign and helping liberate France and parts of Africa. In 1942, the Battle of Midway occurred in the Pacific, with US forces absolutely destroying the Japanese Navy, which was resorting to kamikazes due to limited resources. In Africa and the Mediterranean, the United States, Canada, Australia, and British would help other Allied countries against the Italians, who had assistance from Nazi forces. The Italians surrendered in 1943, and Hitler was losing more land and power. On June 6, 1944, Operation D-Day would take place on the beaches of Normandy in France. The greatest losses of life would be those of American heroes in Omaha, but victory would be theirs, and France would be free from German hands. Now, Hitler was losing much of the progress that was being made, and now he had to fight a war on both the Western and Eastern fronts. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler died by suicide in his bunker in Berlin. There are two different stories on what happened to his body. Whether it be by the Soviets or the Nazis themselves, it is proven that Hitler and his wife's corpse were burned. Now all that was left was Japan. Like their comrades, the Germans, they had been winning battles with speed, but not power. Power would soon catch up with them with the beginning of the Manhattan Project.
My name is Max, and today we're going to talk about the... But in all seriousness, we're going to be talking about how US scientists created one of the world's most devastating weapons that would end up changing the world, the atomic bomb. Back in late 1938, deep within Berlin, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann were partaking in one of Germany's favorite pastimes, pounding uranium and neutrons together for fun. After consuming some bratwurst and sauerkraut, Otto and Fritz discovered they had created nuclear fission. Nuclear fission is the act of splitting a large atom into smaller atoms. This results in a large amount of energy to be given off, almost like a bomb. There was just one problem about that. This wasn't just normal Germany. This was 1939 Germany, aka Nazi Germany.
Oh my God!
And to them, nuclear fission sounds like it would make a pretty destructive weapon. German-American physicist and local Nazi hater Leo Szilard was worried about Otto's and Fritz's research falling into the wrong hands, so Leo wrote a letter to President-man Franklin D. Roosevelt. The letter was also signed by Albert Einstein. The letter warned of Nazi efforts to build a nuclear weapon. On October 9th, 1941, There were two Nagasaki.
With the nuclear bombings of Japan, the final major Axis power was forced to surrender. The world had endured 6 years of the worst fighting in human history to date, with around 80 million dead and countless casualties. Many families would never see their loved ones again. The creation of the atomic bomb defined the eventual end of the world, with worse wars sure to come, and allies turned enemies with the beginning of the Cold War.